The slap happened so fast I barely saw it coming. My name's Owen Mitchell, I'm 49, and that single moment just cost a $1.2 billion company everything they'd built over 22 years. Let me back up a bit. You know how some people think success is all about being in the right place at the right time? Well, sometimes it's about being the wrong person in the right place when someone decides to show their true colors. That's exactly what happened to me at what was supposed to be the biggest celebration in Titan Automation Technology's history. I'd been with Titan since the beginning, literally since we were 5 guys in a converted garage, trying to figure out how to make industrial robots talk to manufacturing systems without everything crashing every 20 minutes. Back in 2001, when most people thought automation was just fancy conveyor belts, we were building the backbone that would eventually run half the manufacturing operations on the East Coast. 22 years of my life went into that company. 22 years of 3 a.m. emergency calls when a production line went down at some factory in Ohio. 22 years of writing custom protocols that nobody else understood, but everyone depended on. I wasn't just an employee, I was the guy who made sure the lights stayed on, literally and figuratively. The night everything changed started like any corporate celebration you've ever seen. Titan had just gone public, hit that magical $1.2 billion valuation that gets everyone excited about early retirement and stock options. CEO Nolan Cooper wanted to throw a party that would make the tech magazines take notice. Crystal chandeliers hanging from a ballroom ceiling that probably cost more than most people's houses. Imported champagne that tasted like liquid gold, according to the catering staff. The kind of event where you shake hands, smile for photos, and pretend you belong with people who measure success in zeros. I wasn't supposed to be there, honestly. I mean, technically I got an invitation. They needed the founding team for the photo opportunities and investor schmoozing. But parties aren't really my thing, especially when there's work to be done. And that night, there was definitely work to be done. See, while everyone else was celebrating our IPO success, I was dealing with what we call a critical system migration in the business. Sounds boring, I know, but when you're responsible for industrial control systems that manage million-dollar production lines across 17 states, boring can quickly become catastrophic. We were moving our core manufacturing protocols to new servers, and the timing had to be perfect. One wrong move, one packet loss at the wrong moment, and factories from Michigan to Georgia would be dead in the water come Monday morning. So there I was, sitting in the corner of this fancy ballroom with my beat-up laptop, wearing what I always wear, khakis and a polo shirt. Not trying to make a statement, just comfortable clothes that don't get in the way when you're crawling around server racks or troubleshooting network issues at 2 in the morning. My thick glasses reflected the screen as I monitored data flow patterns, watching terabytes of industrial data move through systems I'd spent 2 decades building from scratch. The ballroom was packed with the usual crowd. Investors in $3,000 suits, board members with their perfectly styled wives, tech journalists hoping to catch the next big story. And right in the center of it all was Sophia Reynolds, Nolan's wife. Picture everything you'd expect from someone married to a newly minted tech billionaire. A designer gown that probably cost more than my truck payment, jewelry that could fund a small startup, and that particular kind of confidence that comes from never being told no by anyone who matters. Sophia had been making rounds all evening like she was running for office, accepting congratulations and praise like she'd personally coded every line of our automation software. Her little entourage of society friends followed her around, hanging on every word and laughing at jokes that weren't particularly funny. You know the type, people who think money automatically makes you interesting and important. I was deep into troubleshooting a latency issue between our Chicago hub and 3 manufacturing plants when I heard the distinctive click of high heels on marble floor, getting closer to my corner table. I didn't look up right away. When you're dealing with industrial control systems that keep production lines running, you don't break focus for small talk. The migration was at a critical phase, and I had about 200 megabytes of protocol updates that needed to complete before midnight, or we'd have some very unhappy clients come Monday. "Excuse me," came this sharp voice from somewhere above my laptop screen. "I need you to get me a glass of the Chateau Margaux, the 2010, not the 2012, and make sure it's properly decanted. I can tell the difference." I glanced up from my screen and found myself looking at Sophia Reynolds, standing there with her arms crossed and one foot tapping impatiently like I was supposed to jump up and salute. Her little circle of friends had positioned themselves behind her, all watching with these amused smiles like they were about to witness something entertaining. "Ma'am, I think you've got me confused with the waitstaff," I said, keeping my voice level and polite. "I'm Owen Mitchell, Senior Systems Architect. I'm handling a critical network migration right now that can't really wait. The temperature in our little corner of the ballroom seemed to drop about 15 degrees. Sophia's expression went from mildly annoyed to genuinely outraged in the space of about 2 heartbeats. Her friends started whispering behind their hands, and I could see this was about to become one of those situations that gets remembered for all the wrong reasons. "Do you have any idea who I am?" she said, her voice getting that dangerous edge that means someone's about to do something they'll regret. "Not really," I replied, turning back to my laptop screen where a progress bar was showing 73% complete on a particularly crucial database sync. "And honestly, I've got about 500 manufacturing workstations, depending on this migration, completing without any packet loss. So if you'll excuse me." That's when it happened. The slap came so hard and fast that my head snapped sideways, nearly knocking my glasses clean off my face. The sound echoed through that fancy ballroom like a gunshot. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. The jazz quartet missed a beat. Even the waiters froze with their champagne trays halfway to tables full of suddenly silent investors. For about 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then Sophia started screaming about respect and knowing your place, her voice getting higher and more shrill with each word. I sat there, feeling the heat spreading across my left cheek, watching my laptop screen flicker as my hand instinctively moved to steady the machine. 22 years of my life's work was on that computer. 22 years of custom protocols, proprietary algorithms, and system architectures that kept Titan's entire operation running. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, getting slapped by the wife of a CEO, while simultaneously keeping their billion-dollar company from falling apart. The migration progress bar on my screen showed 78% complete, still 22% to go before our manufacturing clients could sleep easy that night. How dare you? Sophia was practically shrieking now, playing to her audience of society friends who were eating up every dramatic moment. "Do you know what my husband could do to you? Do you know who you're talking to?" I adjusted my glasses and looked at her calmly. "Ma'am, I'm talking to someone who just assaulted me while I was trying to do my job. And right now, that job is more important than whatever point you think you're making." That's when Nolan showed up. Not to check if I was okay, not to see what the commotion was about, not to ask questions like a responsible CEO should. He came over because his wife was upset, and apparently that was the only thing that mattered in his world. What's going on here? He demanded, putting his arm around Sophia like she was the victim in this situation. 22 years we'd worked together, 22 years of building something from nothing, of solving problems that nobody else could handle, of keeping the company running when everything should have fallen apart. And here he was, treating me like I was some random troublemaker who'd wandered in from the street. "Your employee just completely disrespected me in front of everyone," Sophia sobbed, really playing up the drama for the growing crowd of onlookers. "He refused to serve me and was completely insubordinate. I've never been treated so poorly in my life." I wanted to laugh at how she was spinning this, but the look on Nolan's face told me this wasn't going to end well. This was a man who'd just become a billionaire on paper, and was more concerned about his social standing than the facts. "Owen," he said, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom in a way that made sure everyone could hear. "You're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you out, just like that. No investigation, no questions about what actually happened, no consideration for what I'd contributed to getting him to this moment." I slowly closed my laptop, the migration still only 81% complete. I wanted to explain what would happen if I left now, wanted to tell him about the fail-safes I'd built into every system, about the dependencies that nobody else in the company fully understood. But Nolan had already turned away, comforting his wife like she was the one who'd been wronged. The crowd parted as I stood up, laptop under my arm, and walked toward the exit. I could hear the whispers starting already, probably speculation about what I'd done to deserve such public humiliation. But here's what they didn't know. What nobody in that ballroom understood except me. Every system I'd built over 2 decades had something called a dead man's switch. It wasn't out of spite or some kind of revenge fantasy. Dead man switches are standard practice in industrial automation, especially when you're dealing with critical infrastructure. If something happens to the primary engineer, accident, illness, kidnapping, whatever, the systems need to protect themselves from unauthorized access attempts. It's a safety feature, not a weapon. The switches worked like this. Every 48 hours, I had to provide biometric authentication to confirm I was still alive, still employed, still authorized to maintain the systems. If I missed 2 consecutive authentication windows, the core protocols would automatically assume I was compromised and lock down everything until proper authorization could be reestablished. The moment HR processed my termination and revoked my access credentials, which happened about 20 minutes after I walked out of that ballroom, those switches started their countdown. My biometric signatures were no longer valid. The systems I'd designed began interpreting this as the beginning of a hostile takeover attempt. I drove home that night listening to my phone buzz with text messages from colleagues who'd heard what happened. Most were supportive, a few were shocked, and one was from Tommy Rodriguez in our Chicago office. "Owen, what the hell just happened? The system alerts are going crazy over here." I didn't respond to any of them. What was I supposed to say? That I'd just been fired for refusing to serve wine to my boss's wife? That 22 years of loyalty and expertise had been thrown away because of someone's bruised ego? That come Monday morning, Titan Automation was going to learn exactly how much they didn't know about their own company. Saturday was quiet. Sunday, I started getting calls from other engineers asking technical questions about systems they'd never had to touch before. I let them go to voicemail. By Sunday night, I was getting calls from shift supervisors at client facilities reporting unusual error messages in their control systems. Monday morning hit Titan like a freight train going full speed into a brick wall. The first production line threw a critical error at exactly 6:47 a.m. at an automotive parts plant in Detroit. By 7:15 a.m., a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility in North Carolina was reporting complete system lockouts. By 8 a.m., 3 major clients were on the phone demanding immediate explanations for production delays that were costing them thousands of dollars every minute. By 9:30 a.m., Nolan was calling an emergency meeting with his engineering team, all those hotshot MIT graduates and Stanford PhDs he'd been hiring to modernize our operations. I heard about it later from people still on the inside. Picture a conference room full of million-dollar talent staring at error messages they couldn't understand, watching their company's reputation disappear in real time. "What exactly are we looking at here?" Nolan demanded, standing in front of wall-mounted monitors, showing system status displays that were more red than green. "Sir," the new lead engineer said, his face already pale with sweat, "it appears the core manufacturing protocols are in some kind of protected mode. Every time we try to access the primary databases, the system locks down further." "Then override it," Nolan snapped, loosening his tie like that would somehow fix the situation. "You're supposed to be the best engineers money can buy." "Override the damn thing, sir?" "We can't," another engineer chimed in, his voice cracking slightly. "The architecture is, it's like a maze built inside a fortress. Every path we try leads to another security layer. And if we attempt to force access, the system threatens to wipe all data permanently. We're talking about complete data destruction, not just downtime, but total loss of 22 years of custom protocols." That's when reality started hitting them like a freight train. They'd fired the only person who understood the system that ran their entire business. Not just understood it, I'd built it from the ground up, piece by piece, protocol by protocol, over more than 2 decades. You see, when you're building industrial automation systems, you don't just write code and hope for the best. You're dealing with manufacturing equipment that costs millions of dollars, production lines that need to run 24/7 without interruption, and clients who lose thousands of dollars every minute their operations are down. So you build layers of security, redundancies, and safeguards that would make Pentagon security experts proud. The core manufacturing protocols I designed weren't just software. They were digital DNA that had evolved over 22 years. Every client requirement, every emergency fix, every system upgrade had been woven into a tapestry so complex that even I sometimes had to trace through multiple layers to remember why certain decisions were made. But that complexity wasn't accidental, it was necessary. When you're responsible for keeping automotive plants, pharmaceutical facilities, and food processing operations running smoothly, you can't afford simple solutions that break under pressure. By Tuesday, the stock price started its death spiral. Titan's shares dropped 18% in the first hour of trading as word spread that the company was experiencing technical difficulties that were affecting client operations. By Wednesday, 3 major manufacturing companies that had contracts worth over $200 million combined, were threatening to terminate their agreements if normal operations weren't restored immediately. That's when Nolan started making desperate phone calls. First to headhunters, trying to find someone who could reverse engineer my work. then to consulting firms that specialized in industrial automation. Finally, to former employees who might have some insight into the systems I'd built. The problem was, I'd been the only constant through 22 years of growth and change. Other engineers had come and gone, some promoted to management, others lured away by better offers, a few who just couldn't handle the complexity of what we were building. But I'd been there through everything, the sole keeper of institutional knowledge that couldn't be documented in any manual or training program. Thursday brought the crisis to a new level. A pharmaceutical plant in North Carolina that manufactured insulin pumps was forced to shut down production entirely when their quality control systems stopped responding to input commands. The plant manager was calling Nolan every hour, explaining that they had FDA deadlines to meet and couldn't afford any more delays. Each day of downtime was costing them roughly $800,000 in lost production, and they were already talking about filing breach of contract lawsuits. Meanwhile, I was in my garage doing what I'd always done, solving technical problems, but this time I wasn't solving them for Titan. I was building something new, something better, something that wouldn't depend on the whims of people who couldn't tell the difference between a systems architect and wait staff. Word travels fast in the industrial automation community. It's a smaller world than you might think, and people talk. By Thursday afternoon, I was getting calls from former clients, competitors, and engineers I'd worked with over the years. They'd heard what happened at Titan, and more importantly, they'd heard about the technical crisis that followed. Owen, said Janet Kovac, VP of Operations at Midwest Manufacturing Solutions, during a call that Thursday evening. We've been watching what's happening at Titan, and frankly, we're concerned about our own operations. We've been thinking about upgrading our automation systems anyway. Would you be interested in consulting on a project? Janet's company had been one of Titan's smaller clients, but they ran 3 manufacturing facilities that produced components for agricultural equipment. It was exactly the kind of operation I understood, complex enough to require sophisticated automation, but practical enough that the people running it actually understood their own business. I might be available, I told her. What kind of timeline are you thinking about? Well, our contract with Titan is up for renewal in 6 months anyway. If you could design something more reliable than what we're dealing with now, we'd be very interested in talking. That conversation led to 2 more similar calls on Friday. Companies that had been watching Titan's public struggles and wondering if they needed to start looking for alternatives. The automation industry runs on reputation and relationships, and when a major provider starts having unexplained technical failures, their clients get nervous. Friday afternoon, my phone rang with a number I recognized, Nolan's direct line. I let it go to voicemail the first time, and the second time. On the third call, I answered. Owen, he said, and I could hear the desperation in his voice even before he started talking. We need to discuss this situation. There's been a misunderstanding, and I think we can work something out that benefits everyone. No misunderstanding, Nolan, I said, watching data compile on my laptop screen for a new automation protocol I was designing. Your wife assaulted me at a company event, and you fired me to protect her reputation. That's pretty clear cut. Look, whatever you want, salary, equity, a VP title, whine us, we can make it work. The board is breathing down my neck, and our clients are talking about jumping ship. Just tell me what it'll take to get you back here and fix this. I had to admire his directness, even if it came about 6 months too late. It's not about money, Nolan. It's about respect. You made it clear last Friday night where I stand in your priorities. That was. Sophia was having a bad night. She's been under a lot of stress with the IPO and everything. She didn't mean anything personal. She slapped me across the face in front of 200 people because I wouldn't serve her wine. How exactly is that not personal? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then I heard another voice in the background, Sophia, demanding to know who he was talking to. A moment later, she was on the phone. Owen Mitchell, she said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. I don't know what you did to our systems, but you better fix it right now. I'm warning you, if you don't come back and repair whatever damage you've caused, I will personally see that you're sued for sabotage and corporate espionage. I hung up and blocked their number. Some bridges aren't worth rebuilding, especially when the people on the other side are the ones who burned them down in the first place. The collapse happened faster than anyone expected, even me. Within 3 weeks of that phone call, Titan's automation systems were failing across the board. Manufacturing plants from Detroit to Atlanta were reporting cascade failures. When one system goes down, it triggers problems in connected systems, which triggers more problems. And suddenly, you've got a domino effect that nobody can stop. The automotive plant in Detroit had to halt production entirely when their robotic assembly line controllers started giving conflicting commands. Picture million-dollar robots trying to install car doors upside down because the positioning protocols couldn't communicate with the quality control sensors. The plant manager told the local news that each day of downtime was costing them $1.2 million in lost production. But it wasn't just one plant. A food processing facility in Ohio that packaged everything from breakfast cereals to frozen dinners was forced to switch to manual operations when their contamination detection systems stopped responding. The FDA was asking questions, insurance companies were making phone calls, and lawyers were filing preliminary paperwork for what would eventually become a class action lawsuit. By the end of the month, Titan had lost contracts worth over $800 million. Not just delayed contracts or renegotiated deals, completely terminated agreements with penalty clauses that added insult to injury. The stock price went from $47 per share on IPO day to $8.57 in 4 weeks. Investors were demanding explanations that Nolan couldn't provide without admitting that his entire operation had depended on one person he'd fired over a social embarrassment. The board called an emergency meeting and voted Nolan out as CEO. The official statement talked about strategic differences and new direction, but everyone in the industry knew what really happened. You don't lose 90% of your company's value because of strategic differences. You lose it because you don't understand your own business well enough to know who's actually keeping the lights on. Meanwhile, I was building something better in my garage. Not out of revenge, but because that's what engineers do. We solve problems. The automation industry needed systems that were more reliable, more secure, and better documented than what most companies were using. I had 22 years of experience in what worked and what didn't, and now I had the freedom to build it right from the beginning. Janet Kovac's company became my first official client. They signed a $2.3 million contract for me to design and implement a complete automation overhaul for their 3 facilities. The work was challenging in all the right ways, complex enough to be interesting, practical enough to deliver real value, and managed by people who understood that good engineering takes time and costs money up front, but saves both in the long run. Word spread quickly through the manufacturing community. Engineers who'd worked with me at Titan started calling, asking if I needed help with the growing workload. Tommy Rodriguez from our old Chicago office was the first to jump ship, followed by Sarah Carver from operations, then Mike Peterson from systems integration. Within 6 months, I had a team of 8 people working out of a converted warehouse space, all of us equity partners in Mitchell Industrial Solutions. The business grew organically. The way good businesses should. We didn't chase venture capital or try to become the next billion-dollar startup. We focused on solving real problems for real companies, building systems that worked reliably and could be maintained by normal human beings. Our clients paid their bills on time, recommended us to their colleagues, and treated us like partners rather than vendors. A year after that gala, I ran into one of Titan's former board members at an industry conference in Chicago. He told me the whole story of what happened after I left. How the consulting firms they hired couldn't make sense of my architecture. How they eventually had to rebuild everything from scratch, which took 18 months and cost over $50 million. How most of their major clients had moved to competitors during the downtime. We should have handled that situation differently, he admitted over coffee. Nobody realized how much institutional knowledge walked out the door with you. I didn't gloat or say I told you so. What was the point? The whole situation had been a learning experience for everyone involved, just an expensive one for some people. 2 years later, Mitchell Industrial Solutions was doing $15 million in annual revenue with 25 employees and clients across 3 states. We weren't trying to take over the world. We were just doing good work for people who appreciated it. The company culture was exactly what I'd always wanted. Skilled professionals treating each other with respect, solving interesting problems, and building something that would last. I heard through the industry grapevine that Nolan eventually found work as a regional sales manager for a software company in Phoenix. Nothing wrong with that. Sales is honest work, and maybe he learned something about the difference between managing people and actually understanding the business they're in. As for Sophia, I honestly don't know and don't care. Some chapters in your life are better left closed. These days, when I'm training new engineers, I tell them this story, not to scare them, but to remind them of a few important truths about our profession. First, technical expertise gives you more power than you might realize, but it's also a responsibility. When people depend on systems you've built, you have an obligation to build them right and document them properly. Second, respect is a two-way street. You can't demand loyalty from people you don't treat with basic human dignity. And if you're in a leadership position, your personal relationships and social status will never be more important than the people who actually do the work that makes your success possible. Finally, no matter how secure your job seems, always keep your skills sharp and your professional relationships strong. You never know when you might need to start over, and when that day comes, your reputation and abilities are the only things you can really count on. The automation industry has changed a lot in the past few years. New technologies, new approaches, new companies trying to disrupt everything that came before. But the fundamentals haven't changed. Good engineering requires experience, patience, and respect for the complexity of real-world problems. Those qualities can't be bought or downloaded or outsourced. They have to be earned through years of solving problems and learning from mistakes. That's how a $1.2 billion company collapsed, because someone's wife couldn't tell the difference between a waiter and the guy who kept their entire operation running. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one with the most power. They just don't feel the need to prove it until circumstances force their hand. In the digital age, true power doesn't belong to the person with the biggest title or the fanciest office. It belongs to the person who understands the systems that everyone else depends on, but nobody else can fix. Remember this: you can fire an employee in 5 minutes, but it can take decades to rebuild the knowledge that walks out the door with them, and some knowledge can never be replaced at all.
I'm freezing. I'm bleeding. Slowly fading away. But don't worry, I'm fine. The cold has settled in my heartbeat, like winter living in my veins. Every breath feels numb and fragile. Every smile just hides the pain. I'm breaking quietly in silence, falling slow without a sound. Yet I keep saying I'm okay, while my world burns to the ground. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. Maybe pain just learned to live here. Maybe sorrow feels like home. So I wear my wounds like armor and survive them all alone. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. If you ever see me smiling, no, it's just my last defense. 'Cause sometimes love means hiding how much you're suffering. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. It's okay. Don't pity me, heart doesn't need your mercy. I can still stand on my own. I was broken by your leaving, fell deeper than I thought I would. But pain has taught me how to heal now and survive what once I couldn't. You don't have to look back sadly, don't reach out with guilty hands. What you shattered made me stronger. Now I rise where I once collapsed. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow, I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling, I'll learn to breathe again. I once begged for your affection, now I've learned my worth in scars. And the man you left in pieces found his own way through the dark. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow, I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling, I'll learn to breathe again. Begun. My heart doesn't need your pity, not another empty sign. I've got enough strength left within me to rebuild this life of mine. My feet are steady through the sorrow, I can stand through all the pain. You don't have to save me, darling, I'll rise alone again. I'll rise alone again.